2020, baby, I'm sorry, but this is an intervention. It's come to the point that your behavior has led to the devastation of a lot of lives, and really, that's not okay. I know it's been a really tough year, but honestly, that's because of you. So I would like to take some time to sit down and recap what it is that's been so horrible for so many people, and maybe we can talk through it, okay? But in all seriousness, guys, it's been one hell of a year, emphasis on the hell part. So much has happened, and it feels like this year has lasted much longer than 366 days because yes, it was a leap year, as if we wanted an extra day of this misery. So join me in reliving the absolute disaster that was 2020 as we look to the future and hope for a positive and fresh start in 2021. Before I get started on the video, please go ahead and like this video. It really helps us out over here and it supports our channel. So this year started off horribly. First thing to make headlines in 2020 were the Australian wildfires. The wildfires were so devastating that it was declared one of the worst wildlife disasters in modern history. This disaster affected about 3 million animals and scorched over 46 million acres of land. Australia has one of the most abundant collections of wildlife on the planet, so these wildfires absolutely decimated the Australian environment. The fires had been burning from July of last year until about March of this year, but headlines broke in January because of how much damage had already been done and how long it was taking to battle the blaze. Researchers don't know how many animals died in the blaze because it's really impossible to tell the full extent of the damage on the wildlife, but it is believed that many of them were displaced and fled the areas that were affected. It will take some time for the land to recover, but this isn't the only tragedy that happened this year. We lost a lot of celebrities this year, most notably Kobe Bryant, Chadwick Boseman, and Alex Trebek. NBA player Kobe Bryant passed away January 26 at the age of 41 after being involved in a tragic helicopter accident that killed everyone on board. After being caught in thick fog on the morning of the incident, the pilot lost control and crashed into the Calabasas Hills. Kobe, his daughter Gianna, and members of Gianna's basketball team were on board as well. The world mourned the death of the basketball legend, and we were all moved to tears while watching the live broadcast of his funeral. Another legend we lost this year was actor Chadwick Boseman, who was famous for bringing the Marvel superhero Black Panther to life on the big screen. Chadwick passed away on August 28th at the age of 43 after a battle with colon cancer. His cancer diagnosis wasn't made public until after his death, telling us that while he was taking the world by storm as King T'Challa, he was in the middle of his cancer treatment. His death took the world by surprise not only because he was so young, but because we didn't know about his illness. He battled until the very end, and he will always be a hero to all of us. Another legend who passed away this year was Jeopardy host Alex Trebek. Alex passed away November 8th after a long battle with pancreatic cancer, and though he wasn't the most famous person, a lot of us grew up watching him on TV and being a staple in our childhoods. He was a wholesome man who kept up the fight until the end, and though he's gone, he will never be forgotten. What else made headlines this year? Why, World War III, of course. For a brief moment earlier this year, people were worried about the possibility of World War III happening after a US military airstrike killed General Qasem Soleimani, an Iranian general. As a result, several people swore revenge on the US, issuing threats of attack on the opposing government. Though a lot of people feared the worst, things seem to have cooled down and the suspected World War III never happened, but there were still plenty of memes. The idea of a third world war took over social media, including TikTok and Twitter, where the possibility was greatly discussed, but instead of a war, we got a pandemic. Obviously, the biggest thing to happen this year was the COVID-19 pandemic. Though the first recorded case of the virus was back in November of last year, it didn't really hit the rest of the world until around March, as many countries around the world went into lockdown. Here, toilet paper and bread were gone from the shelves, people were taking up cooking like they never had before, whipped coffee became the new craze thanks to TikTok, and all of our pets were happy because we were at home with them 24/7. But there was still a dark side to the lockdown as well. Many people lost their jobs and their income, kids were out of school, missing prom and graduation. Thousands of people are still contracting the virus and dying every day. Hospitals became overwhelmed and still are. Anti-maskers became a thing, and the world sort of just fell into chaos. Things subsided a bit during the summer months, but just this fall, cases began to surge once again. Lockdown measures were once again put into place, and it seems like the end will never come. Vaccines are starting to get rolled out now in certain places across the globe, but even that is a sensitive subject. COVID really took over the world unlike anything we've seen in years, and as much as I'd like to believe that this will subside in the following year, things can always change. As we were in lockdown in the midst of the pandemic, the Black Lives Matter movement rose up. Though the movement has been around for a while, starting as a hashtag in 2013 after the death of Trayvon Martin and growing into a bigger movement in later years, 2020 saw a huge rise in support and popularity over the summer months following the death of George Floyd. His death sparked protests in many cities across the US and around the world. As many of you may have seen on your social media pages this year, people were sharing posts about racism, sources to educate yourselves on a number of subjects from slavery to colorism and racism to the treatment of black trans people and everything in between. We saw people getting more woke and holding celebrities accountable for their past racist remarks and actions. This led to the cancellation of YouTubers like Shane Dawson and Jeffree Star. Though they had been cancelled earlier for their alleged involvement in the Bi-Sister scandal, these two were also being held accountable for their past racist actions and remarks. Shane was being held accountable for a number of things, including his past blackface videos as well as past sketch comedy characters. For Jeffree, things like being racist to other YouTubers, saying the N-word, and other derogatory things about black people, among other highly offensive things, haunt his past, and this year we saw a huge dip in support on his channel and his makeup brand. But YouTube isn't the only place we saw some serious scandals. The entertainment world was full of scandal, most notably the Ellen scandal and the Amber Heard scandal as well. This year we saw a lot of drama surrounding Ellen DeGeneres and her talk show as allegations of a toxic work environment were brought to light. We saw people from guests to staff members alike speaking out about their time on The Ellen Show and the way Ellen treats others. Being called one of the meanest people alive, former staff members called her out on things from racial microaggressions to banning crew members from eating meat and firing people for just talking to her out of turn. Ellen also faced backlash after telling her show's viewers that her quarantining experience was similar to jail, even though she lives in a mansion. A lot of people turn on Ellen, but not as much as people turn on actress Amber Heard. Amber was in the news so much this year as the libel case between her ex-husband Johnny Depp and The Sun publication was underway. Though Johnny was pegged as the abuser in their relationship, evidence that was presented in court showed that Amber was really the villain and that she was really the abuser in the relationship. Fans turned on the actress because they were made to believe that Johnny was such a horrible person when in fact that was not the case. Since then, there have been a rally of support, and this case has sparked the conversation about abusive relationships and men being the victims, since that isn't as widely talked about as it should be. Though these scandals were heavily reported and televised, another thing that took over the TV this year was the Tiger King documentary. Though it feels like it came out years ago, it was actually March. The Tiger King took over the internet as it got people talking about Joe Exotic and Carole Baskin, the drama between them, and whether or not Carole really did feed her husband to the tigers. The memes were everywhere for a few weeks, sparking parodies, Halloween costume ideas, and TikToks. But speaking of TikToks, there was a lot going on over there as well. We saw a lot of TikTok trends, from viral dances to challenges, and we even saw the threat of the app being banned in the US. People were in the news for all kinds of things, whether they were a TikTok influencer getting into a fight or throwing parties in the middle of a pandemic, or if you were one of the people who got hurt doing a dumb challenge on TikTok. But one of the biggest headlines on the app were the ones that threatened the creators' platforms. The government in the US believed that this TikTok ban would hurt China since it is a Chinese-developed app. Though there were a lot of people who were worried about personal information being stolen on the app, President Trump said that this ban would be in retaliation against China for having spread COVID and in retaliation against the teenagers who ruined his pep rally. Though this story was in the news for a few weeks this year and creators on the platform were kind of scared, nothing really came from it, and they're still free to whip and nay-nay or whatever these kids are doing over there. But speaking of President Trump, 2020 also saw the happenings of the US presidential election. This election was really intense because not only were the two main Democratic and Republican parties so divided, so was the country. The US had already seen a huge boom in support for the Black Lives Matter movement, which sadly divided the country, but the economic collapse in the country caused by lockdown also had its effects on the American people as well. On top of that, since we are in a pandemic, mail-in ballots saw a huge dump in popularity this year as people were looking for a safer way to cast their votes. The election took place on November 3rd, but it wasn't officially called until days later as the ballots continued to be counted into the weekend following Election Day. Joe Biden came out as the winner of the election, but many states were called for recount as others disputed many votes, calling many of them fraudulent and invalid. Regardless, Joe Biden was elected, but other than breaking voting records, history was made this year as Vice President-elect Kamala Harris became not only the first woman VP, but also the first Black and South Asian person to hold this title. It was a historic day when Kamala won her seat because it gave young women, especially young Black and South Asian women, someone to look up to being in a seat of power. Now, I know that but there have been many other big things that happened this year, so I'll just give some honorable mentions to the aliens, the confirmation of UFOs, the monoliths, the murder hornets, all of the anthropological discoveries made this year, Brexit, Meghan and Harry giving up their royal duties, the Netflix show Love is Blind, you remember that one? The next generation of consoles being this year, and everything else that happened. So 2020, it's been rough. I know we're almost at the end, and as we look to the future, I hope that you learn from the horrors of this year and do better. We've all been through the ringer this year, and you, 2020, are the common denominator of all of our problems. Please don't let the events of this year repeat themselves later on in history, because we're having a hard enough time as it is. So goodbye 2020, and F you. Now let's get into some comments from our video man forced to sell PS5 because of this. Mr. Jen says, I don't think I'll give him an F rather than giving him an A+ for an interesting story. I mean, it's really sad, but he kind of had that coming to him. You never lie to your partner. Just moral of the story, don't lie. Dark Zombie Girl says, shouldn't have lied. It might also be because they didn't have the money at the time to start with, or she could have bought him one for Christmas. Very good point. However, if she did buy him one for Christmas, I'm pretty sure she took that back right after. Kier V715 says, Bree, you like Girls' Generation? After hearing that, you're instantly my favorite host in IO. I used to love Girls' Generation back in like the 8th grade, whenever that was my jam. I knew all the dances, all the words to the songs. Haven't listened to them in years, but I don't know, maybe I'll get back to it. But anyway, I've been your host, Bree Room. Thank you so much for tuning into the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And until next time, stay safe, be awesome, and TTFN, my dudes. All right. 2020. You. The world after a US military airstrike killed General Qasem Whipped coffee became the nuclear. Yeah. This election fraudulent and invalid. No, that's invalid. No. What?